Let's dive into a thought experiment. It's so simple on the surface, but it's so powerful that it could literally break the world as we know it. It's all based on a deep economic and sociological analysis that asks one single profound question.
What if for one day, just 24 hours, all of us stopped? No spending, no working, no clicking, no scrolling, nothing. What would our world actually look like the very next morning? Well, to figure that out, we first need to lay down the rules of the game.
Okay, so here are the ground rules for a 24-hour total freeze. For one full day, the entire commercial and digital world just goes dark. That means no spending any money, no browsing the internet, no scrolling through social media, no streaming shows. The only things you can use are the things you already physically own right now.
All right, so the first and most obvious thing to happen is a financial shockwave. I mean, just try to picture the massive river of money that flows through our economy every single day. What happens when that river suddenly smashes into a giant countrywide dam? Okay, get ready for this number because it's an absolute monster. $54 billion in consumer spending would instantly freeze solid. To give you some perspective, that's more than the entire yearly economic output of some countries, and it would just vanish from the economy in a single day. It doesn't get delayed, it just stops.
And when you stop spending, the government feels it immediately. Every time you buy a coffee, or fill up your car, or pay a utility bill, a little slice of that goes to taxes. So with all that activity gone for a day, that's about $2.5 billion in tax revenue that just disappears. Poof.
But here's the part that really matters. You're probably thinking, okay, but won't people just spend twice as much the next day to catch up? Well, not really. A massive chunk of that money, we're talking almost $13 billion, is lost forever. It evaporates from the economy, never to return.
So this is the key distinction you have to get. It's the difference between deferred revenue and lost revenue. Deferred is just delayed. You didn't buy that new pair of jeans today, so you'll just buy them tomorrow. The money eventually comes back. But lost revenue is tied to time. You can't uncancel your Uber ride from yesterday. You can't go back and eat the lunch you never ordered. That economic moment is just gone, forever.
Now, if you look at where that permanent loss comes from, it gets really interesting. Food service is the biggest hit, obviously. A restaurant can't serve twice as many meals tomorrow to make up for today. But look at this slice right here. Unserved ads, $1.5 billion. That is the entire business model of the modern internet. And it's completely perishable. If an ad doesn't get shown, that potential money is gone for good.
Okay, this is where it gets kind of wild, because you think a day of total silence would be bad for every company, right? Wrong. For ad-based giants like Google, yeah, it's a catastrophe. But look at companies like Netflix, or even your health insurance provider. For them, it would be a profitable shock. Think about it. They still collect your monthly subscription fee, but their costs would plummet because nobody is using their service. It would literally be their most profitable day in history.
But the financial chaos is really just the beginning. The real danger here isn't about the money that disappears. It's about what happens when the fragile, physical systems that run our entire world are suddenly thrown into complete and utter chaos.
This brings us to something called the bullwhip effect. Just imagine the sophisticated AI that runs Amazon's warehouses. It's constantly predicting what you're going to buy next. So what happens when its data feed shows one day of zero sales, followed by a day of double sales? The algorithm completely panics. It can't make sense of the data. The result would be months of supply chain chaos, ordering way too much toilet paper and not nearly enough of something else.
And if you think that's bad, consider something way more dangerous: the grid shock. Our entire electrical grid is a fragile, perfect balancing act between how much power is made and how much is used. If demand suddenly plummets by, say, 50%, the system gets overloaded with excess voltage. That forces power plants into emergency shutdowns to prevent damage. And here's the crazy irony. The moment everyone turns their lights and TVs back on, that sudden surge of demand could physically blow out transformers, plunging entire regions into darkness for days, maybe even weeks.
So, okay, we've got economic chaos and our infrastructure is breaking down. But what about us? What about the human side of this? What does a day of total silence actually do to our brains?
Well, first up, you get a collective dopamine crash. And we are talking about genuine physiological withdrawal. People would get irritable, anxious. You'd probably even feel your phone buzzing in your pocket when it's not even there. Meanwhile, the algorithms that feed you content would go blind. Your For You page would completely break. And what happens the next day?
A massive 200 to 300% surge in usage as everyone scrambles to catch up on what they missed. But after the withdrawal, after the anxiety fades, a very dangerous realization would start to dawn on millions and millions of people. With no ads telling them what they need, no outrage feeds to scroll through, and zero pressure to consume, they might discover something really profound, that they're actually happier. And that realization, that simple thought, is absolutely lethal to an economy built on keeping you just unhappy enough to keep buying more stuff. And this leads us to the final, and honestly, the most revolutionary part of this whole analysis. What happens after that day? Because this event isn't just a protest, it's the discovery of a quiet, terrifying new form of power.
You see, you have to understand the difference. A protest that has demands, that's a negotiation. It's like a general strike. There are things you want, and it creates a dynamic that can eventually be resolved. But a protest without demands, that's just a rejection. It is terrifying to the establishment because there's no one to negotiate with. There's nothing you can offer them. It's a quiet, collective no thanks to the entire game.
And the establishment's reaction would follow a very predictable playbook. First, there's just confusion. Is the internet broken? Then comes the bribe, massive sales, maybe even government stimulus checks to lure everyone back into shopping. When that doesn't work, the narrative war begins, framing this peaceful act of silence as economic terrorism. And the final step? Gatekeeping, creating systems where you have to prove you're participating just to access basic services. So this all leads to a massive battle for a second day of silence. On one side, you have people feeling that afterglow of peace and quiet from the first day. On the other, you have the system fighting back with its two oldest and most powerful weapons: fear, by manufacturing some sort of crisis, and greed, by unleashing the biggest sales event in human history. And this is maybe the most important takeaway from this whole thing. An action like this doesn't result in a new law being passed. Its effect is so much deeper than that. It creates a new culture. A culture where people realize that constant consumption is a choice, not an obligation. And that true power lies in the simple ability to just be quiet. Which leaves us all with one final, lingering question to think about. If the people suddenly learned that their ultimate power is to simply stop playing the game, what game does that actually leave the powerful in charge of?